Hugh, thank you so much for being here today. You are a master of philosophy, if I could call you that. I guess.
Well, I'm a philosophy professor, so that means that I had, academic training and taught for many years in the academic discipline of philosophy. One thing that's worthwhile, and something we were talking about earlier, is the difference between an amateur and a professional.
Yes.
And the root of the word amateur really means one who loves broadly. And there's a tendency in our culture to think that that's somehow an insult if you say someone's an amateur as opposed to a professional. But really, at the deepest level, philosophy means the love of wisdom. Mm-hmm. And that's something that doesn't require a PhD. Now, I certainly am a huge advocate for academic philosophical training in terms of learning how to think more clearly, write more effectively, speak more articulately. However, in terms of an area of interest that enriches life, I think it's something that's good for everybody. Because a professional philosopher these days is really someone who writes in a very narrow area, which by my lights is actually a problem. There's sort of hyper-specialization took root in the 20th century, and it started with the sciences, right? The idea of having different areas of science working in different areas, and then there was this grand hope that somehow that would fill out the whole.
Have a great show.
All right, thank you.
Good sounding good.
Thanks, guys.
All right, sounds good. And while that might work well for natural science, it's come to infect the liberal arts as well and the humanities.
Yes.
So now you're not just a professor of.
Well,
go ahead. Yeah.
Well, the problem is that people have lost the ability to think. Right?
In a well-rounded way.
In a well-rounded way. And that's
right.
what I love about philosophy so much, is that the whole concept of philosophy is critical thinking.
Yes.
Is to question everything.
Right.
And I feel like philosophy should be a mandatory course in every single college, at least
agree.
the basics.
I would agree. There's a tendency, again, with hyper-specialization, for people to think, I know already where this begins, and I'm just going to take it running where it's going now, right? So, for example, I worked with PhDs in biology. And these are very smart people who had extensive graduate training. But let's say they had come out of the Florida education system, go to attend the University of Florida, an excellent research university. That means they would have taken their 3 mandatory general education classes, maybe something in English, maybe the first semester of a language, any number of those things. And then after that, they're just going to be majoring in biology, and the rest of their time is going to be constrained by those parameters and those paradigms, those worldviews.
Yeah.
Then they go to graduate school, and now they really hit the road running, because it's not just you're doing biology, you're specializing in dolphin communication.
You're going more and more narrow.
More and more narrow. So imagine that's a person who's teaching at the college level, but they have no well-rounded background.
So it doesn't form context.
That's right. That's right. They don't know. And this is particularly difficult with a subject that I know is near and dear to your heart, which is contemporary psychology. Contemporary psychology basically looks at anything that's more than 10 years old as folly. Not all. Not all.
More
but
or less, yes.
There is a predisposition
that.
to looking at, and I mean, God forbid you bring up Freud in a psychology class. They'll laugh and say, go to so-and-so's English class if you want to talk about Freud.
Yes.
So I wholeheartedly agree. Philosophy is not just a professional discipline. It is about training to be able to think clearly and to ask those deep questions that, beyond a certain age, people don't tend to ask them. Kids naturally ask philosophical questions, right? Daddy, what happens after we die?
Kids are the ultimate philosophers.
They are.
Yeah.
I mean, there are several schools of thought which say exactly that we're not educated into philosophy, we're educated out of philosophy. And that's a really bad thing.
How did you get into philosophy?
Okay, so I was not a very good student in high school. In fact, I was a pretty terrible school. I was lucky enough to go to a good school, though, so I learned. But in terms of my grades, they were pretty terrible.
Is it because you didn't know what you wanted to do? You didn't have goals? Or is it because...
Well...
I'm just curious.
I don't mean to flatter myself, but there are those who just say I was too smart for it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's right or wrong,
I get related to that on some level.
but I can say this. You're not asking philosophical questions there. You're studying, memorizing facts. You're learning how to do calculations. There's nothing there that, again, even at a good school,
It doesn't, yeah, right. It doesn't create context.
it's not asking the fundamental questions. And those were things that I was always enamored by, but I didn't know there was any academic discipline that related to it. So when I went to college, that was the first time I ever was exposed to it formally and said, okay, there really are questions to be asked here. And in particular, I was telling you earlier, I was in a sociology class. I was taking it as part of my general education requirement, mostly because I liked everything I had heard about the professor. And one day he's going through various conceptions of society, and he puts up the Hindu caste society, which, crudely speaking, right, you have your Brahmins, then you have your warriors, then you have your people doing commerce, and so on down. And it's got a pyramidal shape to it. Mm-hmm. Fast forward that summer, I'm taking a political theory class at NYU, and we're reading Plato's Republic, and the professor...
Life-changing, isn't it?
Exactly, and the professor puts up the pyramidal structure of philosopher, kings, warriors, commerce. And I just was like stunned. And I raised my hand, I say to the professor, isn't this very much like the Hindu caste society? And he just goes, I know nothing about Hinduism. And at that moment I went, this is what I want to do. I want to understand how two independent ancient cultures, because they're both forming these ideas approximately around the same time.
In different regions.
And for a while,
seemingly no communication with one another.
Apparently all the scholarly study has demonstrated that no, there really was no. I mean, for a long time there was this thought there must have been some kind of cross-pollination.
That's a reoccurring theme throughout history.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And in this one, people who really are pure scholars, right, the ones who really get down into knowing Sanskrit in its most primitive ways and classical Greek, they've done the work and they say, nope, no cross-pollination. And that just fuels the question more deeply. Why would two ancient cultures both come to such similar conceptions of the ideal society rooted in the soul of the person? So it's that connection between the individual's soul and the ideal society.
I almost wonder if it's just our DNA programming. I mean, that shapes our thought process.
Well, at one level, certainly that's true, right? I mean, our DNA is what unfurls the fact that we have a cerebral cortex and all these higher functions that, say, chimpanzees don't have, or lower animals.
And I mean, it's the ego that drives us to compete with one another. It's the ego that puts other people down, and it's different hierarchies of intellectualism that makes us feel like we're superior to other people. And we create societal systems based on that, and they take forms in different shapes, but ultimately, I mean, you see it in many different regions.
Indeed, and certainly the question of, is man naturally altruistic? Is he naturally predatory? Is it just about power, right? All of those are questions that, going back to the beginning of philosophy, right up until this very minute, right? People are attempting to give arguments and explanations for why one is unlike the other, or whether they're the same. So, for example, Rousseau is writing at a time where social injustice is kind of very parallel to what we're seeing today in terms of economic inequality. And he writes The Social Contract, he writes his treatise on the moral sentiments, and he starts to ask this question, like, what's more fundamental, the urge to work cooperatively or to be just work for my self-interest? And ultimately he says, well, both, right? We're complicated. Now,
It's balancing. We're constantly creating contracts that benefit us on different levels in the long term and short term, right?
And those guys always presuppose, though, that there was also a natural human urge to help one another, right? That it's not just pure competitive, cutthroat, say, capitalism, which we see
Because that's
now.
a tribal mentality.
What does Rousseau say on this? I mean, I think it partly comes from the idea of very, very difficult to get along if it's just you.
Yes.
Right? You can have your hunting tribe and we can go out and we can do our thing. But at the end of the day, we're going to come back with our, loin of deer or what have you, and we're going to need somebody to have, swept up, gotten the washing done, so there's a reciprocity that goes on there. But I want to go back to Plato for a second, because that's a very good natural entry point. So Plato writes the Republic at a middle period in his writing career. Very early on, as you well know, his teacher was Socrates. Socrates, who's sometimes regarded as the father of philosophy, although as we were discussing earlier, that's not really where philosophy begins per se. But Socrates certainly had a huge impact in terms of what was the trajectory of philosophy after that. Go ahead, you got a question?
Why is it that, philosophy in general is just is thinking and breaking things down, and trying to understand the truth.
Right.
It's the hunger for the truth.
Right.
That's philosophy.
Let me go. Oh.
But hasn't philosophy always been around ever since people started thinking? I mean.
Yes. Okay, good. So this is exactly where I was going to go. So I'm going to go back a little further now from Plato. So if we go back about 500 years before Socrates, we know that there was a period of great prosperity around the Mediterranean. And we're talking about not just the coast of Greece and Italy, but also the coast of what would be modern-day Turkey. And what happens when you have some money around and you can actually relax?
Safety.
And leisure time.
Yes.
And leisure time. And what would happen is these sailors would be lying on their backs looking up at that crazy Mediterranean night sky, if you could even imagine that without the light pollution of today. And they're going, what are those? And they say, well, we think that that's the god Mars, right? Or the god Ares, if we're going to be a little more precise. And we think that that's the god Zeus. And maybe there's a guy from India nearby, and he says, well, no, we call that one, Dharma, right? Or that one is, the fire god. Okay, can't be both. So which is it? And they say, well, we have these stories, and they start discussing maybe the Iliad and the Odyssey, right? And then over here they'll be talking about early sutras in the Indian tradition. And what we have there is the first time the human mind tries to give a rational explanation for why things are the way they are, as opposed to merely rooting it in myth, right? Because we all grow up in our own context, rooted in our own set of myths. But if that's the extent of what we have to say about things, then we're not thinking, right? So if you say to me, Hugh, what do you think the good resides in? And I just say to you, well, in the Bible, page X, Y, and Z, line so-and-so, God says yada, yada, yada. That's not really a rational explanation. That's just
not philosophy.
Me. That's not good. That's not philosophy. So what we have there at the dawn of human consciousness is the dawning of philosophy. And in particular, they had this idea of the four elements, earth, air, water, fire. And also this idea of opposites, hot and cold, wet and dry. And they wanted to know what came first. Was it the hot? Was it the wet? Was it the dry? And starting with this fellow by the name of Thales, Thales, off the coast of Ionia, again, present-day Turkey, they start to articulate and write down these ideas. And that begins a chain of conversation and argument that leads right up to this very day. And these earliest philosophers are really more physicists, because they're asking, what are the physical mechanisms that make things the way they are? And they work with the concepts that they have at the time, which, of course, things that they can look at, that they can touch, that they can theorize. So one guy chooses water, and he says, well, how does reproduction work, right? We study reproduction. Reproduction involves this dissemination of fluids. Okay, well, what are the fluids like? Well, they're hot and wet, right? We don't know much more about what Thales had to say, but that's the beginning of the attempt of an articulation of a physical, rational argument. Fast forward ahead 500 years. Oh, go ahead.
This was, you said 4,500 years ago?
That's right, about 500 BC.
4,500,
well,
2,500 BC?
I'm being good. I'm being imprecise. So that earlier conversation that I was talking about, where the guys are laying back on the boats and they're doing that stuff, that starts at about 4,500. Thales is about 500 BC.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
So fast forward again 500 years, and we get to Athens. And Athens is the most powerful, the most culturally rich city in all of ancient Greece, to the point where it's really difficult to even begin to make an analogy to today, right? Maybe take New York City, Paris, London, Tokyo, smash Dubai as it's rising up, smash them all together, and that's the cultural significance of Athens, right? It's where all the great architecture is, where all the great art is, where the great thinkers are. And Socrates was a creature of Athens. He himself never wrote anything. But what he did do is he went into the marketplace and he engaged in conversation, or what is sometimes called dialectic, to lektike, laws, and went to people who presumably knew things, right? So he'd, let's say, run into General Schwarzkophagus in the agora, in the marketplace, and say, hey, General Schwarzkophagus, surely you more than anyone knows what courage is, having successfully, fought these wars and been so successful.
And it wasn't just material things that he was questioning. He was questioning why people were doing things, behaving certain ways, and abstract concepts that no one had thought about before. They were just acting because of cultural, they had to.
Well, think about it this way, right?
But he was kind of the first or the most prominent.
In the moral domain.
Yes.
Right. So as I said earlier, those early philosophers are really much more in the physics realm. Not to say that that's not still going on in Socrates' time, but Socrates in particular.
But he was more abstract.
Concept of virtue. The concept of virtue is what really drove the conversation. Because what is courage? That's a virtue. What is wisdom? That's a virtue. What is self-control? That's a virtue. So they're all...
And that's the Republic, right?
A little later. Bear with me.
Okay.
No. You're in the right vein. We just want to start a little bit earlier.
Sure.
So
Sorry.
Socrates is going around, as I say, engaging in these conversations with aristocrats, politicians, right? People who say, I know what justice is. I know how to make Athens great again, right? And so, he would run into, Trump-Cunnican in the marketplace. And, oh, Mr. Trump-Cunnican, you, if anyone knows what greatness is, you can tell me what greatness is. And then Trump-Cunnican would try and put forward some definition. Socrates would show how that definition is contradictory. And if it's contradictory, it can't be true. So what we have there now, Constantine, is the use of logic to challenge beliefs, values,
Logos.
The order of things. Logos is the order of things. It also, interestingly enough, also means word. So it can mean also book, and it can also go to, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. So it has that one has a long shadow. But that was the idea, that there is a natural order to things, and the role of reason is to understand that. And that's the parallel to contemporary science, which I know you have a great interest in, right? They both begin in the same place. What's the best explanation for the order that we see, right? So now, in the moral domain in particular, because this goes back to your question about how do we find people with common ideas about what the good life consists in or what the rationally good soul is, derives from this idea of, well, if man is unique in the fact that he can rationalize in a way that lower animals can't. Nothing against lower animals, but as fantastic as orangutans are, we can't engage with a conversation with them about virtue. So that seems to be something that's unique to humans, or persons, as we would sometimes be a little bit more technical. Because what are the attributes of persons? Well, they think. They maybe have free will. They sometimes act well. They sometimes act badly. We blame one another in a way that we don't blame orangutans, right? So that's the start then of a question, which is, what is justice? What is the nature of, we know it's a virtue, but what is its nature? What makes it what is, and hold your thought just 1 minute, and that's the question that drives the Republic. Plato asking, what does justice consist in?
Yes. Well, I personally think that justice is a repercussion of immoral behavior, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, but I guess let me back up a second. Do you believe that people are inherently
Good. Okay.
or
Well,
bad?
you just played into my hands there. So,
Yeah.
as I mentioned earlier, Socrates didn't write anything.
I read your mind there.
Yeah, that's good. Socrates didn't write anything. The reason we know about him is because of his student Plato.
Yes.
And Plato was just a super genius beyond super geniuses. And early on, in his earliest dialogues, he basically gives us a picture of what Socrates was like. So that's where we know he engaged in this dialectic. It got him in trouble with the powers that be in Athens, to the point that they made him drink hemlock, right? So he was executed.
I thought he was stoned.
Nope, drank hemlock, famously.
For corrupting the youth.
That's good, for
Right.
corrupting the youths of Athens and inventing new gods, right? Which was a bogus charge. Everybody knew it was a bogus charge.
Well, really, it was because he was making people question the politics.
That's right. That's right, exactly.
That's all it
He
was.
was challenging authority at a time in particular that authority didn't want to be challenged, because they had just
They
lost.
never want to be challenged. Let's be real.
It's particularly worse after you've lost the Peloponnesian War to the Spartans. So that war raged for 27 years, I want to say. And at the end of it, Athens was in bad shape.
Okay.
And and you see this
Unstable.
unstable, and people are afraid. Mm-hmm. I mean, you see this so presently in our culture.
It's interesting how after a long period of war, especially after a costly long war,
Yes.
there comes an authoritarian figure
Yes.
who shuts down all of the people who question authority.
Anyone who challenges
It keeps
them,
repeating itself, but
you are
continue.
no, you are right on point. So there's a pattern there.
Mm-hmm.
And Plato puts his finger on that in the Republic. He notes that governments pass from more just to less just. And in particular, let's say, Plato wouldn't necessarily agree with this, but we tend to think that, say, democracy is a better form of government than tyranny. But democracy is also messy and can lead to chaos. And then people want the strong man, and they go for the tyrant. Mm-hmm. And this would be a different conversation for a different time. There are frightening parallels for what's been going on in the United States and the world in the last 30 years or more.
I mean, interestingly enough, Greece still exists.
Yes?
So maybe it's kind of a yin and yang situation where you need to have them both. Maybe.
Well, I mean,
I don't know. That's up for debate. But
Well, no, your point is well taken, because, I mean, I guess less yin and yang in the Western sentiment, more just of a pendulum, right? The pendulum swings both ways.
exactly.
But going back to your other question, which is really meaty, namely, is the nature of man
Good or
just or unjust, right? So Plato writes the Republic, as I say, right in the middle period of his writing. And it's significant because it's long. It's 9 chapters long. The other dialogues are very brief. They're like 15 to 50 pages. They're very accessible. Anybody who wants to pick up a copy, of The Trial and Death of Socrates, it's a great read. By the time we get to the Republic, Plato begins book 1, and it reads pretty much like the other earlier dialogues, and it ends in confusion, because all of Socrates' dialectics end in the wisdom that I know that I do not know.
Yes.
Right, so famously, the Delphic oracle, which was for 1,000 years regarded as the deepest connection to the god Apollo, or truth, famously said at one time, no one is wiser than Socrates. And supposedly Socrates said, what? I don't know anything. So that's why this is the story that he tells, that's why he went on this life of inquiry, testing other people who are reputed to be wise, discovering that they don't know anything.
Right.
So what's the sense in which Socrates is wisest? He knows that he does not know. Mm-hmm. And that's how book 1 ends. Plato's more ambitious. Plato wants to go there. He wants to go the step to say, actually, this is what the truth is. But what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that it's a reoccurring theme that the more we know, the less we know.
The more you know about a subject, the more you realize how little you know.
Yeah. And it's fascinating.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, the contemporary astrophysicist, has a wonderful a meme that's going around, which basically says it's one thing to know enough that you think you know a subject, but that's totally different than knowing enough about it to realize you really have no idea.
Yeah.
And that's where Socrates is so valuable, but philosophy in general is so valuable.
Because that's the wonderful thing, is that as you explore a new topic, 5 more questions arise.
Right. That's right.
Right.
And it gets more and more difficult. So, exactly. So, as I say, book 1 ends in confusion. Yea, wisdom consists in knowing that you do not know. But one of the other interlocutors with Plato, Crito, who is supposedly a relative, says, Socrates, I've heard this conversation before with you, but I've never really heard a sustained argument for why justice is superior to injustice. So he says, I'm going to give you...
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Absolutely. I want to hear a sustained argument for why justice is superior to injustice.
Okay.
In other words, why being good is better than being bad.
I understand.
So he comes up with this very, very famous thought experiment, which is rooted in a story from an even older historian named Herodotus. And it involves a ring. And so the story is this guy, Gyges, is out, he's a shepherd, right? He's out there with his sheep. And one day there's like the earth rumbles and this fissure opens and he goes down in it and he finds the tomb of some great king who's died years in the past. And there's this ring on the skeleton. So he takes the ring.
Okay.
And that night they're sitting around the fire with his fellow shepherds and he turns the bezel around and suddenly he notices that the other shepherds are talking about him as if he was not there. So he discovers that it's a ring of invisibility, that if he turns the bezel...
This reminds me of something, okay.
Yeah, this reminds you of something a certain classics professor in Oxford wrote a bit about that's been really popular in movies.
Yes.
But we need not name names.
No,
okay. This, I'll name him, Crito is the character in the Republic, says to Socrates, imagine we had 2 such rings. Give one to your perfectly just man, and give one to your perfectly unjust man. Tell me why they won't behave the same way. Because if you've got the ring of Gyges, you basically have the power to do whatever you want to do. And in the actual story, what does Gyges do? Well, he seduces the queen and kills the king. So this is the reputation. And interestingly different from that other story, it's not that the ring is inherently evil. It's that the ring allows...
Well, it's a tool.
It's a tool that reveals the natural human predisposition to misbehave. That's the idea. That if we could get away with it, we would get away with it. So then so he wants this...
Yeah.
Well, that's the question.
I mean, that's a story. I don't necessarily think that is objectively true.
Well, that's the question that you asked me, right? Why do people behave in the way that they do?
But I don't think both people would behave the same way.
Okay. So again, this is the argument.
If I had this ring,
yes,
I would want to do good.
Okay.
I wouldn't use it that often, though.
Okay.
I mean,
so
I don't know.
It's kind of like the Superman suit.
Yeah.
Sorry, the Spider-Man, like the Spider-Man suit.
Okay. Same concept, but
same idea, except with Superman, he's from another planet. Would you be able to resist the temptation of that one time? Okay, I'm going to use it in a way that I think is right, but I'm really going to be hiding something from others.
To what point?
To the point that you then get on a slippery slope where then you start using it for your own personal benefit.
Why?
Well, that's the question.
Right.
That's the question, Constantine.
But
our nature...
But then, if you are using it for unjust purposes, then you're not a just person.
So the question is, why would the just person act differently?
Because they're not just.
Okay. No, because they are just. Why would the just person not act unjustly?
Because they're just.
Because they're just.
Yes.
But what is it that really keeps them from doing that?
It's a higher. I've always had voices in my head guiding me, right? Huge. I believe in quantum consciousness and everything like this. Higher power. There are things, energies outside of the universe that guide us along. I believe in destiny and all of these things. I wouldn't go out of my way to act unjustly. I also believe in karma. I believe in reincarnation. I believe that doing good to other people actually lightens my energy and attracts more positive things to me.
Okay, so that last one that you articulated about karma, that's actually kind of similar to what Plato says, right? That if you really could see how the logos works, right, he would say something like the doctrine of karma. It's fascinating. It's fascinating how similar they are. We were talking earlier about early India and early Greece.
Yes.
It seems like they surely must have had some kind of crosstalk. Apparently they didn't. But something like a theory of karma is in Plato. And that's one of the aspects of his argument for why Crito is wrong, and that in fact all the weight is on perfectly. The idea that the perfectly just man, his reason would be so tuned to the logos that he wouldn't even contemplate it.
Right.
Well, there you go. So you're a Platonist at heart. at least on this one. At least on this one. But let me try and make the case for Crito a little bit more. So the idea that he has is that, again, and I get that you disagree with this, and that's thumbs up, that, again, by nature, if we could get away with it, we would get away with it.
I feel like the person making that argument is unjust by nature, and so he's projecting his injustice to those who are just.
Crito explicitly says, I don't believe this. He says, Socrates, I want you to defeat this argument. And that's really important because in philosophy, very often, we advance ideas that we ourselves don't believe.
Sure. I mean, that's what science is disproving everything beyond the reason of a doubt, right? So I love it.
Yeah, so that's the idea. Now, you ask me, what do I think? It depends on when you catch me.
Depends what I ate that day.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, we're here in New York City, and in New York City, you just watch the streets, and you can have both. You can hold both views within 2 seconds of one another, just watching what goes on.
I don't know. I see people acting irrationally, acting crazy. I can't help but to feel sorry for them. I can't.
Indeed. Actually,
my heart goes out to them. They're suffering.
Right. That's another nice way of posing the question. What's the role of irrationality?
Well, it's a chemical imbalance in the brain.
Okay, that was quick. This would now lead us into a different domain of philosophy. What's the relationship of the mind to the body?
Yes, dualism.
Or the brain. Well,
Descartes.
It doesn't have to be, because the question is, what's the relationship, right? The relationship might be they're the same. The relationship might be totally different, Descartes. Yeah? Okay. So Western philosophy has occupied both positions. Early on, it's mostly mind-body dualism. Again, the idea that the soul or the mind is fundamentally different.
Well, it's built on Christianity of the soul.
You got to go back earlier than that, because Plato would agree with this. And that's a solid 1,000 years before Christianity takes strong root. How so? Well, when you and I are thinking about these concepts, we'll just call them concepts for want of a better word.
I just want to, because everything that we're covering right now has been thoroughly digested so many times, I want to try something new.
Okay.
Can we incorporate consciousness into this?
Absolutely.
Rather than the mind?
Absolutely.
Because, I mean, currently the belief is that the mind is a byproduct of all the neurochemical processes of the brain.
Or it's identical with.
Yeah. But consciousness is more of a spiritual concept, I think.
Well, that's the question. So what would you say is the nature of consciousness?
Well, that's a question, isn't it?
It is. Philosophers tend to think about it this way. Consciousness is an attribute of, wait, there's something coming.
Yeah, I want to come back to the voices guiding me, because okay, so let me just preface this. The universe, let's think more globally, or universally. The universe is the beginning of time, presumably the Big Bang, to the end of time, whatever that might be. And most people, the common thought is that it's just the fourth dimension, right? But they've calculated up to 13 dimensions within the universe. So in my mind, it's the beginning of time to the end of time, and every single combination of electrons that could possibly ever exist. We are three-dimensional vessels traveling through the fourth dimension of time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. With every moment that passes, it spirals into fifth and sixth dimensions, and so on and so forth. That's my understanding of it, and now there has to be some kind of energy outside of the simulation. And then by simulation, I mean electromagnetic, everything is electrons, right? So that, I think, is consciousness. I think it's some kind of energy, a higher intelligence, if you will. I mean, electrons are just packets of information, right? So, and I've thought about this a lot, the purpose of life, and we could come back to this in
Wait.
a moment,
Let me insert there, because I'm not sure I'm tracking yet how you're thinking about consciousness. Is consciousness what informs purpose?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
It's what guides us.
Okay. Even down to the level of the way...
I don't want to call it God because I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual.
Right.
So consciousness is that higher intelligence, perhaps.
Perhaps.
What do you think about that?
Oh, there's a lot there. I mean, let me try and reel it back a little bit, just because. Okay. I mean, there's one thing I can talk clearly about. One thing in terms of the mind and how contemporary philosophers think about it in relationship to consciousness. In the conversation of the day, consciousness is more or less synonymous with awareness. Mm-hmm. Okay. So as we're sitting here, I'm aware that that's a white notebook with blue lines.
I do disagree, but okay.
Okay.
Because our awareness is just what we pay attention to.
No, that's okay.
But yeah.
When I pay attention to it, though, I see that that's a red line on your blue striped notebook, right?
Yes.
I have an experience of it.
Yes. But there's a lot that you're aware of subconsciously.
Oh, sure. Oh no, that's totally...
But that you're not
aware
of.
That is not fully present to my mind right now.
Yes, but that is still affecting you.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
In your peripherals,
Sure.
Your
No,
reflexes,
I'm not in any way, shape, or form disagreeing with that. The question is, what does it mean to have a blue experience?
Yes.
Is that something that has a kind of content to it where I have some knowledge? What do you think? Do I possess some kind of knowledge when I know that that's a blue stripe?
Of course.
Okay, good. The term we use for it in philosophy is content.
Yep.
The content of that idea has two aspects to it. One is a cognitive content. There's a line there. And that's true or false if there's a line there, right? That's that sort of cognitive content. But the other one is consciousness. And the nature of consciousness, again, is a kind of experience. So in seeing blue, I am knowing something, right? I know that that's blue and that's red. Why? Because there's a certain quality to my experience. Now, the minute we invoke qualitative language...
Is that consciousness?
Let me just finish the sentence. Let me finish the sentence.
All right, sorry.
The minute we interject qualitative judgments into our explanation, we have now stepped outside of natural science.
Right.
Natural science has nothing to do with qualitative experience.
Right.
So the question of consciousness then is, can we reduce experience to neural states? Reduce it so that there's no content lost in terms of what the nature of consciousness is. Let me repeat that because it's slippery.
There's a lot there.
It's very slippery. And that's the thing that's so fascinating about these questions, right? Is we're just trying to get more and more sharp, and in the process you go, oh, geez, we're okay.
No, I love it.
So again, let's think about consciousness. Maybe it's the wrong word for it, but the way philosophers...
I think I'm using the wrong word for it, because the common understanding of consciousness is kind of mind. But
the reason we need to be a little more technical there is when we say mind, we mean reason.
Right.
Thinking, right? Clearly that's a product, that's an aspect of mind, but that's different than me seeing that that's red over there. Right? I'm not thinking about anything, it's red, right? I just perceive it or experience it. Okay, so let's see if we're in a place to try and do this. So, if at least it's correct to say that the nature of consciousness is a kind of awareness, maybe even self-awareness, right? Self-consciousness.
That's very subjective.
It's inherently subjective.
But is consciousness subjective or objective?
Good. That's it. So, if consciousness is a purely objective phenomenon, then seemingly natural science should be able to explain everything about it.
Not in our limited capacity of this flesh.
That's right. Separate two questions. We can do it, it can be done, right? So I'm not saying we can do it, but in principle, a perfectly rational being could seemingly know everything there is to know objectively about the universe. And if that super duper natural scientist knows everything there is to know about the universe, then he also knows everything about mind and consciousness. Fair?
One would presume.
One would presume. Exactly. Well, again, it's the presumption of...
This just reminds me of aliens traveling through fourth dimension, and that's why we only see like blips of it. But anyway, sorry.
That might take us a little too far afield.
Okay.
Just maybe.
Oh,
so I'm trying to steer you to a certain question. So
if an objective consciousness would know everything,
right,
then they would travel through different dimensions. They would know the future.
Sure.
What's interesting about quantum physics is that electrons can pass information. There's some studies to suggest that you inherently, your electrons know what's going to happen in the future or something. You have memories from the future.
Right.
I saw
really bizarre stuff. Yeah. Cool, but
that just goes. I mean, this goes to the principle that time is nonlinear.
Right. Now, again, though, tell me.
So that kind of encompasses the objective consciousness.
Right.
That supports some sort of evidence for it.
Okay. Yes, in principle, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the idea. The idea is that if the nature of reality is fundamentally objective, right? So subjectivity is an illusion, unreliable, something that we could capture in a perfectly objective explanation, right? Say yes.
Yes.
You agree,
I'm seeing
you agree with this.
Yes,
All right.
yes, of
All right.
course.
So here's another famous thought experiment. This is a contemporary one. Imagine that there's this woman, Mary, and Mary's a brilliant neuroscientist.
Okay.
And Mary knows everything there is to know about normal human color perception.
Okay.
Right? So she knows all about the rods and the cones.
Sure.
And light.
Frequency.
Precisely, right?
Go ahead.
She knows all that information.
Okay.
But she's learned all of it from within a black and white room, from a black and white computer monitor and television and whatever other things she needs to do her experiments.
But this goes back to the allegory of the cave.
Maybe, but let me finish this one, and then you can tell me if that's right. So, again, Mary knows everything there is to know in principle, because again, if it's all objective, then in principle, Mary could know everything there is to know about normal human color perception from within her black and white room, right? So she could look at your brain and say, oh, Constantine is right now having a yellow experience, right? If you're looking at corn in natural light. Okay. Similarly, she could look at your brain and say, oh, Constantine is now having a green experience, right? And she's going to, and again, she's going to have a very nuanced physical explanation about what neurons are firing, what frequencies of light are doing.
Sure.
But here's the question. If we were to take Mary out of her black and white room and allow her to see grass in normal sunlight, would she learn something new?
She would feel something new.
Okay.
And that would be learning something new.
And therefore, a witch. No.
Burner.
Burner anyway. Seemingly she would
Poor
now...
Mary.
What?
Poor Mary.
Poor Mary.
Yeah.
There's something about her. Presumably she would learn what seeing green is like.
Yes.
Which she would not have had...
Well, she would have that emotional response.
I think you're right when you say a feeling. Right? I mean, if we talk about
a feeling would be an emotional...
Precisely. Or the other way around. An emotional response would be a feeling.
Sure.
I presume all emotional responses are feelings. I'm not sure that that's true, but I think that's right.
I'm very curious about what your thoughts are about intuition, because that is something that is outside of the physical.
All right, but let me stick with my thought experiment here for a second, because this is important.
There's a second part to it.
This is important.
Okay.
If shame on you, you're supposed to turn that off.
This is an alarm.
If, as you say, she will learn something new.
Yes.
Right? She will experience something new.
Yes.
Right? And we've already sort of, at least for the purposes of this discussion, one narrow definition of consciousness is experience. Then even if you have all the objective information there is to know about the universe,
Subjective consciousness,
you still won't know everything. And in principle, an objective explanation, a complete objective explanation must fail.
There's a distinction between subjective consciousness and objective consciousness.
Okay.
It is impossible for a single human to have an objective consciousness. I think
that seems right.
But her subjective consciousness would continue to expand with every new experience.
But again, in terms of explanation, right? We want to know whether are there only objective things in the universe? Presumably, if I'm following you correctly, your objective consciousness, right, it would know all those things, or even be all those things, maybe.
It would know the beginning of time to the end of time and every...
thing in between.
Everything in between,
okay.
Yes. Every dimension that could... Every outcome.
Okay.
Do you believe in destiny?
Bear with me. Does it? Stop trying to get off the subject. I'm going to keep pushing you back. Does objective consciousness know what seeing green is like?
Yes.
Well, then there's a subjective element to the objective consciousness.
No.
Yes, because seeing green is inherently a subjective experience. We proved that with the Mary thought experiment.
It would know every subjective experience.
Well, that's fine, but then that still means that there's subjectivity at work in the universe.
No, but the subjectivity is from a single perspective. Objectivity is every single experience.
Oh, now you're using it in a really weird way. Okay. I thought I was tracking your objective consciousness as, again, something that infused purpose, like a sort of cosmic consciousness informing how everything happens in the physical universe. No?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And it knows what seeing green is like.
Of course.
Well, then there's always an irreducible element of subjectivity in the universe. You were being a little dismissive of subjectivity before. You're like, that's subjective. But what this reveals is you can't get rid of it.
Subjectivity?
Can't get rid of subjectivity.
Unless you're in a coma.
That would be, well, that's an interesting question. If we were to squash all the sentient beings in the physical universe, would there still be consciousness?
That's a good question.
I take it you want to say yes.
Yes, there would be no subjective consciousness.
Let's use your Big Bang, Big Crunch example.
Sure.
Before the Big Bang, was there consciousness?
Yes.
Okay.
Objective consciousness.
Yes.
Yes.
but objective consciousness that also contains all subjectivity. Right?
Inherently.
How does that help? I mean, it might help. I just don't know how does inherently help?
So you're asking me where the line is between objective consciousness and subjective consciousness.
And more particularly, I'm asking you whether outside of that line, is there subjectivity?
If you're having an out-of-body experience, is that a subjective conscious experience or an objective conscious
Fantastic
experience?
question. What do you think?
I'm asking you.
I don't know. I mean, it's a fantastic question, right? I mean, there does seem to be some...
Where do you go? Where is your... is that even consciousness? It would be consciousness.
Right.
Where does it go?
And there does seem to be some evidence, some legitimate evidence, that when people have near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences, that they do perceive some elements that they seemingly couldn't have known, right? Like what a doctor said while they were dead on the table.
Yes.
That would seemingly mean that William James, the philosopher, American philosopher William James, has a lovely phrase where he says, these are the types of experiences that prohibit the premature closing of accounts on reality. We can't just... Can
you repeat that? They prohibit...
These experiences prohibit
the premature
closing of accounts on reality, because because your hard-nosed psychologist, neuroscientist is going to say, that's just some crap in the brain as the brain is dying. Okay, but that crap, right, again, has a subjectivity to it that we can't explain yet. So that's the best I got, is if it's true that they really are some form of out-of-body experiences, or maybe you mentioned intuition earlier, right? There is some evidence that some people possess the ability to know things that they seemingly couldn't know, right? There's people who seem to be able to know a certain event is going to happen before it happens, right? We don't have any idea how to explain that in our normal explanations of how the brain works or how the mind works.
Oh, only through quantum entanglements.
I can't remotely go there because that's just far too outside of my area of expertise.
I mean, that's the only thing I could postulate. I want to change topics.
Sure. Although I got to say, I think we're doing pretty well.
I love this.
Okay, great.
I love this so much. Intellectual stimulation is my drug.
It's a good drug to have.
It's a healthy one, I think. Unless you're alone.
Healthier, yeah.
Then it becomes a problem.
There's actually a word for that, misology. Misology is the hatred of rational thought.
Oh, God.
And you do hear it when people say, I wish I didn't think so much, right?
Yeah.
Or they say,
Well, it's because you're hitting dead ends and you don't have the answers. But I think with a proper diet and the right nootropics and supplements, I think you can actually...
make some progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, because we're just limited to our physical... to light.
Our three-dimensional... to our three-dimensional sensorium.
And all of the chemicals in our brain, which is crazy. I forgot where I was going to go with this, with the topic I wanted to change.
Free will?
We could talk about free will.
But not if that's not what you wanted to go to next.
It'll come back to me.
Okay.
Free will, I have been thinking about this, and I had a really great epiphany.
Okay. Aren't all epiphanies good? Are there any... This is a really great one, though.
This is a really good one. There's different degrees of epiphanies.
I think you're right.
And I think this one is
I think you're right.
a big eureka.
Okay.
Tell me what you think about this. Free will is the ability to stop yourself.
Yeah. So what we would be talking...
Animals don't have free will because they're constantly...
Yeah. No, that's a very important observation, right? I mean, one of the things that we know that limits our friends, the chimpanzees, is their inability to stop themselves, right?
Yes.
The emotional, whatever, the irrational element
Regulation.
of their brain, right, is such that they can't withhold, right? And then the idea would be something like, well, reason is what gives us that power, and that's what free will consists in, right?
Reason is a double-edged sword.
But in this case, it's a good sword, right?
Yes.
All right.
Sorry.
So
Sorry to keep interrupting you.
No, you're fine. No, you're doing great.
Everything is so nuanced.
It gets frustrating, I know.
Yeah. But
Well, what about this though, right? So I'm thirsty,
Yes.
so I want to drink this water, the last little drips of this water. But I find out that you've poisoned my water.
I haven't.
But I find out that you have, right?
But I didn't. Sorry.
I'm sure you. I'm sure you didn't.
Just in case.
Okay, fine. I find out somebody poisoned my water,
you.
right?
Okay.
Somebody poisoned my water. I could then refrain from drinking the water, even though I want to, right?
Yes.
Right. But isn't my desire not to die just what's driving that rejection of the water?
Is this before or after you drink the water?
This is before I drink the water, right? So again,
Okay,
I'm thirsty.
so you're thirsty.
I want to drink
You
it.
want to drink it. You find out that someone poisoned it.
Right.
You have water in the cup and it's poisoned. And the free will is stopping you from drinking the water.
But the question I'm asking you is, the free will, isn't that just the desire not to be poisoned?
Desire to not be poisoned. But what if you do want to be poisoned?
Then I would drink from it.
Yes.
Remember, your thesis was that it's the ability to withhold
Right.
that free will consists in.
But if you're thirsty and you have a cup of water and you're thirsty, but it's not poisoned,
Right.
and you don't drink it, that is free will.
But what would stop me from drinking it?
Free will.
Based on, I mean, free will.
Based on the
free will
structure of your brain?
That's not good.
I don't know.
Free will seemingly has to have something behind it, right? And presumably the thing behind it would be me, right?
Your
Maybe it's my consciousness. Right?
cognition.
Okay,
Let's say.
cognition. What's the content of the cognition? Well, I want to prove that I have free will, so I'm not going to drink it. But isn't that just another desire? See, the whole question turns on, is there something other than desires that move us to act?
Right.
And we think that there's basically two things, right? There's desires and then there's reason, right? So I have a reason to be here tonight, right? What's my reason?
Let's just define desires.
Sure.
That's just dopamine, right? Your
Even knowing nothing about dopamine, it's just something that moves me to act, right? Desire for water, desire for food, desire for sex, desire for power, anything that moves me in a direction to satisfy that. It's an urge, right? I have an urge to satisfy it, right? And again, if free will is the ability to withhold, then the question is, what urge is driving that? If it's the desire not to be poisoned, then that's just another urge.
So the desire to practice your free will is, you're saying, not free will?
Again, if you say to me, Hugh, I'm going to demonstrate that I have free will. I want that water, but I'm not going to drink it. And I say to you, well, why aren't you going to drink it? You would say, I'm demonstrating my free will to you. But that's because you want to demonstrate your free will to me, which means you're being moved by a desire.
Okay, let's define free will for a second.
You were the one who was ostensibly defining free will.
I know, but I feel like you're using it in a way that isn't the proper definition of free will. Because the whole idea of free will...
I only wrote a dissertation on it.
Okay.
But I'm open.
What is your definition of free will,
Okay.
my friend?
Okay, how about this? Let's think through what motivates the problem.
Yes.
Right? Why is it a problem in the first place, right? Well, back in the day, right, going back to the Christian period, and we're just going to say very little about this, there's the idea that God is omniscient, right? God knows everything. If God knows everything, then he knows everything I'm going to do.
Yes.
He knows everything you're going to do.
That would be like destiny.
Precisely.
Yes.
Precisely, right? So if you just plonk it in God's mind, sometimes the term providence.
So then you have no free will.
Precisely.
That's
precisely. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a big problem for years and years and years. Then around the 15th century, Descartes, Newton, and those fellows come along, and now the natural scientific mode of explanation comes around. Chuck God out of the picture. Okay. What does it mean to make a natural scientific explanation? And please don't bring in quantum physics right here because they didn't have it. They didn't have it there yet.
My brain is starting to get a little bit tired.
Okay.
So I'm just.
Okay. All right. So what was the idea supposed to be? The idea is supposed to be, look, there are laws of nature, right? The laws of nature are fixed and unchanging, right? So law of gravity isn't changing. It's fixed. And, right, at any point from the Big Bang to the Big Crunch, there's some time slice where there's all the facts about the universe at that moment, right? At any position, there's a fixed set of facts. Now, if I have the laws of nature, and I know all, at least in principle, I know all those facts, seemingly I can predict everything that's going to happen from that moment, including mom and dad getting together and me being born, including everything I do in my life. If that's true, then seemingly free will is an illusion.
Correct.
Correct, good. 3 major responses to this. And if this is going into too much detail, just slap me around.
Please.
So the first one is to just bite the bullet and say, yep, free will is an illusion.
Yeah.
We are just more complicated animals, right? We're not in principle different from bears and tigers, oh my. We just are. And there are people who still hold this view today. It's not the most popular view in the world, but it easily answers the question. It comports very well with natural science. Now, that's good up to a point, except we don't really live that way, right? We don't
want to believe ourselves to be so simple.
And we don't treat each other that way, right? If somebody says to you, I promise I'll be there at this date and this time, and then they don't show up, and you say, hey, what happened? They don't just go, well, I don't have free will anyway, so you can't blame me for it, right? No. So that then leads to the second position. The second position is kind of have your cake and eat it too. It wants to say that, yes, we have free will, but it's also compatible with natural science, okay? So that would mean that they're going to say that, yep, that story that you told earlier on about how the laws govern everything, that's true, but there's also some sense in which we have free will. What sense is that? Imagine you go to the Cheesecake Factory?
Yes.
All right. Imagine you go to the Cheesecake Factory and, there before you are all the luscious cheesecakes, but they've sold out most of them, so there's only 3 left.
That's always the case.
They've only got 3 left, right? And there's the New York style cheesecake, the red velvet cheesecake, and the chocolate cheesecake, okay?
Those are
Are those good options? Okay. Which one would you choose?
Any, miny, miny, mo.
Really? That's how you'd choose?
I mean, they're all good.
I know, but which one, like right now?
Am I by myself or am I with someone else?
Let's say you're by yourself.
Okay.
And someone says to you, presumably you've gone there because you want cheesecake, right?
Yes.
So you're there wanting cheesecake and they say, this is what we have left. Which kind would you like?
Okay.
Just pick one.
Okay.
Just pick one.
I'll go with the...
I've never had this much trouble getting an answer from somebody on this.
I'm very indecisive. You should see me in the grocery store. It's horrible.
There's a special today on red velvet.
I was thinking not red velvet.
Okay. So that narrows it down to chocolate in New York.
I'll go with the New York classic.
All right.
Sure.
All right. So you want the New York, right?
I'll take it.
You'll take it. Jesus. All right. So
I'm sorry.
typically,
I'm very of the mindset of detachment.
Okay.
So
typically, the story goes something like this: I want the cheesecake, the New York cheesecake, so I choose the New York style cheesecake. Free will. Free will is just choosing in accordance with your wants. And that's going to be radically different from the sort of picture that you were just talking about in terms of non-attachment, right?
Yeah.
This is just your simple common folk going in for some good eats at the Cheesecake Factory, right? They desire a certain kind, therefore they choose it. And so the idea is that we have the power of choosing, but that choosing always still has to have some sort of motivation behind it, desires.
Right.
And that's compatible with the idea that, but of course our desires don't come out of nothing. They come out of our DNA and our socialization.
Do you think that free will is mutually exclusive?
With not free will?
Yes, with destiny.
Oh.
Why can't you have both?
You'll hate this. It depends on what you mean by free will, right? Because if you go with the first route, that in some sense free will is an illusion, you could think that freedom just is being in tune with destiny.
Because I'll give you an example. Throughout my whole life, the voices have been guiding me towards psychology.
Okay.
But because I'm a fourth generation filmmaker, cinematographer, my great-grandfather, he pioneered Soviet, or I guess Russian pre-Revolutionary War documentary.
Oh, fascinating.
Film. Fourth generation, my grandfather, long history. He was a Soviet combat camera operator during World War II. So there's a lot of history. My whole life, I was told that you're going to be a filmmaker. Okay. At 14 years old, my father dies. Then my grandfather dies 2 years later, and then I'm lost. Mm-hmm. There's no one there to teach me. Mm-hmm. But then in high school, I learned about psychology, and the voices were like, this is what you need to pursue. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you felt moved in that direction?
Yes.
Okay.
But I didn't pursue it.
Right.
Because I wanted to make my family proud.
Okay.
But everyone's dead. So 20 years, I've had a lot of trauma with that. But I feel like my destiny is to go into psychology, but my free will was to do photography and film, and that wasn't working out because that wasn't, kind of. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Again, subjective consciousness and objective consciousness, and so. I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you resist
destiny,
your life doesn't show its rewards.
Doesn't
fulfill.
Doesn't flourish
right
in the way that it could have. Something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
so they're not. Free will is not mutually exclusive, but it does exist.
There are many people who have thought something similar to what you're articulating. Sometimes it's called providence, sometimes it's called the logos, right? The idea that reason just is getting in tune with the logos. So somebody would say, you know what, your reason was out of tune, right? You thought, right, that this was the right course for you, but you were mistaken. Right? And that would be objective, right? That wouldn't just be, like, oh, he was doing his own thing. It's like, no. He got it wrong, right? He thought that was what he both wanted and, here's the key bit, what was best for him. So there's a sharp distinction between what you want versus what is best for you. And in contemporary philosophy, people have been nervous to go with the best picture anymore because it seems contrary to the idea that I'm the best judge of what my life is and should be, right? We like to think that. That's very popular, right? No one's going to tell me what my best life would be. Well, there maybe are some arguments that we make bad decisions, and the bad decisions are ones that are just out of tune with the nature of things. And when we get in tune with the nature of things, you can feel how it goes much more easily. Right? So I think it's Heraclitus who has this wonderful line that destiny leads the willing, drags the unwilling. Mm-hmm. Right? So you were mistaken, and that's why presumably your life became a slog, and this really was where, and you can say it, where it was meant to be. But you got to realize that you're imbuing some heavy duty, the term is teleology here. Teleology means purposeful or end-directedness. And that's fine, but if you try that in an academic psychology class, you're going to have a tough sell with your teacher but that's fine, right? I mean, it's fine.
I wouldn't do that.
And it's fine to recognize that, again, philosophical explanation, right, is something that, again, is outside of disciplinary, narrow rules, right? So if you're engaging in psychology these days, unless you're at Esalen or some other sort of more Easternly, New Agey place, they're going to expect you to think that the brain is the mind and that's the best way to explain everything.
But that's why I want to pioneer quantum psychology.
All right.
Right? Because there's so much more to our experience than just the neurons of the brain. So.
And to explanation.
And that's why I love philosophy, and I want to kind of incorporate psychology and philosophy together.
All right.
Was it?
I think we covered it.
I love this. I love
Good.
talking
Thank
to
you.
you, Hugh.
It was a pleasure. Pleasure meeting you, and certainly enjoyed the conversation.
I want to continue on, but I feel like we've exhausted.
I think we've done well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks so much.
Thank you
Pleasure.
so much. Truly a pleasure.